we've got this super interesting article from marketyourart.net. It's called What Are Art Commissions and How to Get Them?
Catchy.
Right. So to kick things off, let's just, what are we even talking about when we say art commissions?
So basically, it's when a client's like, hey, I want you to create this specific piece of art just for me. And the artist's like, okay, cool, let's make it happen.
So it's like a collaboration then.
Totally. It's this blend of the client's vision and then the artist brings their own style and skills to the table.
So it's not just like portraits and landscapes. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing those are pretty popular requests.
Yeah, those are classics for sure.
Right.
But think outside the frame, you know? You could commission custom designs for t-shirts, illustrations for websites, even like a sculpture for your garden. If you can dream it up and find an artist who's down, it can be commissioned.
I love that. It's
Oh.
like way more than I even realized. Okay, so for all the artists listening out there,
Yeah.
why even do commissions? Besides the whole getting paid to do what you love thing.
Which is always nice, right?
For sure.
Well, the article, it actually breaks down a bunch of benefits. Like, first off, it's a way to really showcase your skills, you know, in a super personal way. Like, imagine someone wearing a t-shirt with your design on it.
Oh, totally.
Or they've got your painting hanging in their living room. That's got to feel good.
That's like next level.
Yeah. And it's not just about, you know, showing off. It's about finding those people who really connect with your style, your artistic vision, and building a following that way.
It's like you're building a little community around your art. That's so cool. But, okay, let's be real. It can't all be sunshine and rainbows, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be some downsides to doing commissions.
Oh, there are definitely challenges.
Yeah.
The article doesn't sugarcoat it.
Good.
Like, one of the biggest ones is burnout. Commissions, they can be really time-consuming, especially if you're juggling multiple projects with deadlines and stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot to manage.
It is. So finding that balance between doing client work and just creating for yourself, that's super important.
Right, because you don't want to lose that creative spark.
Exactly. The article really stresses the importance of, like, setting boundaries for yourself.
Like what kind of boundaries?
Like, literally blocking out time in your schedule for personal projects.
Oh, okay.
And not being afraid to say no to opportunities if they don't feel right, even if it means turning down money.
That's got to be tough.
It can be, especially when you're starting out. But it's about valuing your time, your energy, your creativity.
And speaking of challenges, what about dealing with difficult clients?
Oh, don't even get me started.
I feel like everyone's got a horror story.
Oh, for sure. Endless revisions, misaligned expectations, you name it.
It's like the artist's worst nightmare.
It can be brutal.
Yeah.
That's why the article, it emphasizes how important clear communication is from the get-go.
Makes sense.
And having a solid contract in place. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of all that later on.
Good, because I have questions.
Ugh,
But yeah, as much as we love the whole starving artist thing, art is a business.
tell me about it.
So let's switch gears a bit and talk about how to actually find these commission opportunities. It's not like they're just going to fall into your lap.
Sadly not.
So how do you, as an artist, connect with potential clients?
Well, the article had some really interesting stuff to say about that.
Okay, good.
Like, for example, social media, right? It's become huge for artists. Think of it like a virtual gallery. You can curate your online presence, reach a global audience.
That's pretty powerful.
It is. And platforms like DeviantArt and ArtStation, those are like digital studios where artists can showcase their work and find clients.
It's like a one-stop shop for all things art.
Exactly. You can network, gain exposure all in one place. And the article actually mentioned this platform called Artistry.io. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. Tell me more.
It's one of those platforms that's specifically designed to connect artists with people looking for commissions. They can set up profiles, showcase their work, set their rates. It streamlines the whole process.
Oh, that's interesting. But what about the real world?
Mhm.
Are galleries and art shows still relevant these days with everything being online?
For sure. Those in-person connections are still so valuable.
You can't beat face-to-face.
Exactly.
So you've got the digital world opening up all these doors, but the real world connections are still key.
Totally.
So it seems like artists have more opportunities than ever to get their work out there. But with that comes the need for guidelines and a solid understanding of pricing, right?
Absolutely. You got to be able to navigate that side of things too.
So let's talk logistics, because I'm guessing there's a lot more to it than just saying, yeah, sure, I can make that for you. So what did the article say about setting up guidelines for taking on a commission?
Well, it starts with being really upfront about what you offer as an artist. Like, what are your specialties? What mediums do you work in? You got to define those things.
So it's about setting those expectations right from the start.
Exactly. Because if a client's looking for a hyper-realistic oil painting and you specialize in abstract watercolor, it's probably not going to be a good fit.
Right, right. And then there's the whole question of pricing, which I imagine can be tricky. How do you even begin to put a price tag on creativity?
It's tough. But the article suggests considering a bunch of factors. First, there's the cost of materials, right? A giant sculpture is going to require a bigger investment than a small drawing.
Of course, that makes sense.
Then there's the time involved. How many hours, days, weeks are you going to be putting into this?
Right, because time is money, especially when you're an artist.
Exactly. And don't forget your experience level. Someone who's just starting out is probably going to charge less than someone who's been doing this for 20 years.
Right, you're paying for their expertise. So it's this combination of like tangible and intangible things.
Totally.
And it can be tempting to undervalue your work, especially when you're eager to get commissions.
But it's so easy to fall into that trap.
The article really stresses the importance of establishing a pricing structure that feels fair to you.
100%. You got to be able to pay your bills. And speaking of being fair, the article talks a lot about clear communication throughout the whole process. Why is that so important?
Yeah, why is that?
Because it's about managing those expectations, avoiding misunderstandings, just building a good working relationship.
So it all starts with like a really thorough conversation before anything else happens.
Absolutely. Even before any contracts are signed, you need to sit down and hash out the details. Like, what's the client's vision? What style are they going for? What's their budget?
Because sometimes what someone pictures in their head and what they actually communicate can be two totally different things.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that game of telephone.
Exactly. So the article, it even suggests that artists create like rough sketches or mock-ups in that initial phase.
I like that idea.
Yeah, give the client a sneak peek.
It's like a visual aid to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And then you can also iron out those nitty-gritty details, things like how many revisions are included in the price, what's the payment schedule going to look like, are there any like kill fees involved?
Kill fees. Okay, now those sound kind of intense. Is that really necessary?
They're not always, but it's something a lot of professional artists include, especially for bigger projects.
What is it exactly?
It's basically a predetermined amount the client would pay if they decide to back out of the commission after a certain point.
Oh, I see. So it's like protecting the artist's time and investment if the project falls through.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to another super important point. Contracts.
Dun, dun, dun. It's getting real now.
I know, right? But they're so essential. A well-written contract protects both the artist and the client.
So it's like a roadmap for the whole collaboration.
Exactly. It outlines the scope of the project, payment terms, deadlines, all that good stuff. It just makes everything super clear.
It's like that saying, get it in writing.
Yep. And it's not even just about protecting yourself legally. It's about setting those clear expectations from the get-go, which can save everyone a lot of headaches down the line.
Totally. Speaking of the process, what happens once the project is actually underway? Does the artist just like disappear into their studio and then magically reappear months later with a masterpiece?
I wish.
Right.
No, the article talks about how important communication is throughout the whole creation process.
So it's not just a set it and forget it kind of deal.
Not at all. Think of it more like a dance.
Okay, I like that.
The artist's leading the way, but the client's a participant too.
Okay.
They're offering feedback, asking questions, making sure the final piece aligns with their vision.
So it's about checking in regularly, giving updates, maybe even showing sneak peeks along the way.
Exactly.
So that open communication we talked about earlier is key.
Essential. And that's where having a clear system for feedback and revisions is super helpful.
Like, how does that usually work?
Well, a lot of artists will build a certain number of revisions into the initial price, and then if the client wants to make more changes after that, they pay extra.
Oh, that makes sense.
It protects the artist from getting stuck in an endless loop of revisions.
Right.
But it also gives the client a chance to provide feedback and make sure the final product is exactly what they envisioned.
It's all about finding that balance. So to recap, communication is like the golden rule.
Right.
From that first conversation all the way to the final handoff of the artwork.
Definitely.
It's about clear expectations, boundaries, and just building a good working relationship.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from defining what art commissions even are to the challenges and the practical stuff.
A lot to unpack.
There is. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. That balance between doing client work and making time for your own artistic pursuits. Because it's not just about churning out commissions, right? There has to be room for an artist's own creativity to thrive.
Yeah.
It's about like keeping that creative spark alive, you know, even when you're juggling client work and deadlines.
It's so important. And the article actually, it talks about this a lot, finding that balance. It's like essential for not burning out.
So how do artists actually manage that? What kind of advice does the article give?
Well, a big thing is setting boundaries. And I don't just mean with clients, like setting limits on revisions or whatever.
Right.
It's about making time for your own projects, like actually blocking it out in your schedule.
Like it's a doctor's appointment or something.
Exactly. Treat it that seriously. It's about prioritizing your own creativity.
Okay, I like that. Any other tips?
Yeah, another big one is learning to say no. Like, if a project comes along and it doesn't feel right, even if the money's good,
Yeah.
it's okay to say no, which can be so hard, especially early in your career.
It's like you feel like you have to take every opportunity.
Totally. But overcommitting, it just leads to burnout. And then the quality of your work suffers anyway.
So it's about being selective, choosing projects that you're actually excited about.
Exactly. The article also talks about seeking inspiration outside of client work,
Oh yeah, like what?
like going to galleries, museums, reading art books, just trying new things, even just spending time in nature can help.
It's like you got to refill that creative well, right?
Exactly. Sometimes you just need to play, experiment, create without any pressure.
That sounds amazing. Does the article give any like real world examples of artists who are doing this well, like finding that balance?
Yeah, it talks about how it's different for everyone. Some artists are super structured, like they have dedicated days for client work versus personal work.
Right.
Others are more go with the flow, like they work on their own stuff whenever inspiration strikes.
So it's about figuring out what works for you.
Totally. There's no right or wrong way. But the important thing is to be mindful of your energy levels, prioritize your well-being, and just make sure you're making time for your own creative growth.
It's like finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here today, from the practical stuff like contracts to the bigger picture stuff like creative fulfillment. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to the article that inspired this whole deep dive. What are art commissions and how to get them? From marketyourart.net.
Such a good read. They have a ton of resources for artists on their website.
Perfect. So if any of our listeners are interested in learning more, maybe even dipping their toes into the world of art commissions,
Definitely check it out.
we'll link to it in the episode description. Okay, so before we wrap up our deep dive into art commissions, I want to leave you with a little food for thought. If you could commission any piece of art, like anything at all, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right?
It's making me think.
I know, it's hard. For me, I think it'd be amazing to have something that tells a story, like maybe a series of illustrations, capturing a moment in my family's history,
Oh, that's really cool.
or like a mural in my office,
Okay, yeah.
something to make it less boring. What about you?
I've always loved portraits.
Yeah.
So maybe I'd commission a series of portraits of like inspiring people from history.
Ooh, that's powerful. It's amazing how art can connect us to these bigger stories, not just our own personal ones.
Totally.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
It has been a journey.
It really has. Thanks to everyone for listening in and exploring the world of art commissions with us. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about the creativity, the business side, and the whole collaborative spirit of it all.
For sure.
And hey, whether you're an artist or just someone who loves art, remember there's a whole world of art commissions out there just waiting to be explored.
So go out there and get creative.
Yes. And until next time, keep those creative sparks flying.